All right, so welcome to the presentation. My name is Kuba Sendor, and I'll be talking about AWS security today. And just as was already mentioned, I'm working at JLabs as delivery manager. So this is not technical role, I would say, anymore. More of a responsibility for managing the team. But in my spare time, I'm still kind of involved in the security. And this is because in my previous jobs at both at the Yelp and at SAP, I was working in the security-related type of roles. So I'm still keeping my interest in this space and want to preserve that and share my knowledge with you. So what's the agenda for today? I'm going to introduce a little bit the concept of what sort of things are we dealing with when we are talking about AWS in terms of security. I will introduce a couple of tools, so CloudMapper and Scout Suite, and also talk about AWS services like CloudTrail and GuardDuty. And at the very end of the presentation, I will show you an example of alerting pipeline. So just to start with, how many of you are working with AWS on a daily basis? Okay, I guess probably more than half of the people in the room. So the concepts there won't be so new for you anymore, I hope. So I will focus mostly on three AWS services today, most popular, I would say. So Identity and Access Management, or IAM for short. So this is a service for those of you who are less familiar with AWS that allows you to introduce this concept of user, roles, policies, and set up all these primitives in your AWS account. Elastic Compute Cloud, or EC2 for short, this is the most popular, I would say, service that gives you a possibility to run a virtual machine and install whatever operating system you want on it, and just run it in a sort of cloud fashion, so you don't have to really provision any hardware. You just get virtual machine and you can do whatever you want with it. And Simple Storage Service, another most popular AWS service that is basically a storage for whatever type of things you want. I would say files, but the concept of files doesn't exist there so much. They're called objects, and an object can be whatever you want, a text file or image, and whatever other sort of piece of data you would like to put there. So starting with Identity and Access Management Service, the type of things that may go wrong there is obviously anything that's related to password policies, or either not setting password policy at all, or if you set it, it's not good enough. It allows for too short password, doesn't have any concept of password complexity, and so on. Multi-factor authentication, so related concept to password and authentication. If you just rely on password authentication, it may actually be not enough if your passwords get leaked. So it's good as well to set up this multi-factor authentication, either through some hardware token or your mobile app, authenticator app. And well, any of these concepts I was mentioning previously, roles or also things like key rotation. So if you don't have established key rotation policy, if your keys get leaked, that may also lead to some security concerns. And inline policies. So AWS policies, in AWS policies, you can modify them. You can either use the pre sort of composed policies, or you can also put your own snippets there, and it basically makes them harder to manage. So if you use inline policies, that also may be a sort of security shortcoming. In terms of Elastic Compute Cloud, we can deal with misconfigured images. So any sort of image that you get, that there is image library in AWS that you can pull images from. You don't have to all the time prepare images from scratch, say for vanilla Ubuntu install this, something like that. You have some pre-configured images, but obviously if they're misconfigured, either on purpose or just by mistake, by not patching the operating system or some of the components of the system, that may lead to some potential security issues. Unencrypted images, so if you have images that are unencrypted, if your AWS account gets compromised, obviously an attacker would be able to just gain access to them without much problem. And if you store secrets in plain text in the instance data, that also is another problem. So there are separate services in AWS to deal with secrets, to exchanging secrets and provisioning secrets for your applications. So obviously you should be using them instead of just storing plain text passwords or other type of secrets in the AWS data instances. And simple storage service, lack of versioning. So actually in S3 you are able to version your buckets. So a bucket is this sort of directory, I would say, that holds your files objects. If you don't enable versioning, obviously if someone comes in, does some changes to your bucket, you are not able to revert them. That may lead to some leaks or some losses in data. A lack of encryption, so similar as with EC2, if you don't encrypt your data there, someone can get access and basically they get all your data for free, so to speak. And similar as with IAM, there is also possibility to configure multi-factor authentication for the delete action on the bucket. So this is the most sensitive, I would say, action, because obviously if you delete it, you may not be able to revert the change. There may be some important data. So having such operation without an additional step that confirms it is also considered a security issue. Okay, so CloudMapper, what this tool allows you to do, basically it's infrastructure visualization for your AWS account. But apart from it, it also comes with a command line sort of interface that has the most interesting commands are Audit Command, Collect, and Report. And in the next few slides, I will go over in more details. So this is an example of the visualization command. As you can see, maybe it's not eye candy, but it's very useful if you're just dealing with security audit of AWS account. You have some infrastructure that is sort of new to you, but is already well established. It says it's running for a couple of months, years, and you just would like to see at a glance what's going on there. So there is this diagram here, maybe not so readable with all the connections, but if you click on any of the elements, you will also see a description in this sort of JSON format that allows you to drill down into more details about each part of the infrastructure. And these three commands that I've mentioned earlier, they allow you, first, audit to look for potential security misconfigurations. The collect command is just sort of a command that runs in the background, collects all the information from your AWS account configuration, and then it is used by the report command that generates for you this more human-readable version of the report that you can read and get some findings from it in a more human-readable fashion. So audit command is just the command line command that lists all of these different issues with your AWS account. So probably the best command to run right after this visualization when you start auditing AWS account. It can catch some basic mistakes, like there is root user without MFA, user that has password login but also doesn't have multi-factor authentication. This is not that big AWS account, so the rest of them are just for this GuardDuty service. But we'll see some examples of the audit command later as well. In terms of collect command, as I've mentioned, it more runs in the background, doesn't really give you much input apart from that it collects all this different configuration from each of the AWS service, from each of the availability zones. And then it actually stores it in JSON files. So yeah, you can go and see what's collected there. To be honest, doesn't make so much sense to do it by hand, but it's very useful if you just want to have a snapshot of your AWS configuration. So in AWS, there is this config service these days that allows you to do pretty much the same thing, but first of all, it costs money. So running AWS config on all of your infrastructure may incur some additional costs. And also, at least in the earlier versions of CloudMapper, it was that actually AWS or Amazon itself wasn't catching up so much with the new services that they were introducing. So AWS config command wasn't catching configuration of all of the services. And this CloudMapper command was actually a bit better because the maintainer of the project, he was just going and updating it with what was just released like in the last few days. I'm not sure how is it these days, but obviously reInvent is happening next week, so we'll probably see more and more updates. And this is the report that is generated based on the collected data. So we have some, I would say, more fancy visualization of each of the services in the account. We can see the findings, severity of the findings, some more descriptions to which part of service it is related to. So we can see, for instance, IAM service that there is a custom policy that allows admin with low severity. So we can take a look and either take some action on it or not. And there is also a similar report to this basic report that's more focused on identity and access management. So it lists all of the users, roles, and inactive principals, for instance, as well. So something to consider when cleaning up your AWS account. And we can see some more in this IAM report, like which services were accessed, which actually services, when they were accessed, and what sort of privilege was allowing us to access this service. This list is actually quite long, so this is like a top of, I guess, 20 services there. And apart from these three main commands in CloudMapper, we can also issue some other ones, like public, allows you basically what it says, lists all of the public resources. So here I would have this host with 2 ports, 25 and 80, open to the public. Find admins, also very useful command. Just probably when you're starting, it's good to start with it, just to get to know who are the admins, which admin accounts we have on the on our account. And find unused, very useful when you're doing some sort of cleaning up of your AWS account. So it's good to see which, for instance, VPC security groups are not used and so on. Okay, and that was pretty much it when it comes to CloudMapper. Right now I'll talk about Scout Suite. So this is actually a tool, as well as CloudMapper is open source. You can access it on GitHub, download it, play around with it at home, at work. Scout Suite is actually maintained by NCC Group, so a large pen test or security company. It supports not only AWS, so CloudMapper was only supporting AWS accounts. Scout Suite, apart from AWS, it also supports things like Alibaba Cloud. I'm not sure if any of you are using it, but it's gaining popularity. But also Azure and Google Cloud as well. So if you are using this other type of clouds, may be useful as well for you to run Scout Suite. I will focus only on AWS in this talk. So it generates a very nice report. So actually, Scout Suite doesn't have much command line interactive sort of thing like CloudMapper had. It just generates this report, and in this report we can see all of the services, and each finding is highlighted in the table here. And we can drill down in each of the service. So for instance, for IAM, we'll have all different issues that were found there, like again, user without MFA, and so on. And it also has this issue severity here. It's not so much actually severity as just sort of a thumbs up, thumbs down if you're doing something good or wrong, because it also highlights which good things you've done, not only bad things and how severe they are, but also it keeps you more motivated, as we already have some good things here, like, well, for instance, no groups with users, no groups with inline policies, so something to be happy about. And here, drilling down into which type of issues we can see in IAM service, for instance. Again, some of them related to lack of key rotation. If we drill down on each of the findings, we'll see some more detailed description of it. So very useful to already get some steps to fix the issue at hand. Similar with S3, we see which buckets, for instance, are here, how many of the buckets, but also if we drill down, we'll see which one of them are misconfigured and on which one of them we should take some corrective actions. And same as with CloudMapper, possibility in EC2 to highlight the external public IP addresses and ports open to the public. And interesting finding as well that I did not find in CloudMapper, maybe there is, but I didn't find it. There is a possibility to notify on the secrets in instance user data, so I think I was highlighting at the very beginning of my talk, but also take it with a grain of salt, so it will just highlight any high entropy strings that it noticed in the user data on EC2 instances. But for instance, in my example, when I was running it on this example infrastructure, it found something that it claims looks like AWS secret access key. But if we actually look at the whole string, yeah, there is some random numbers there, but it's not necessarily a secret access key. At least it doesn't look like it is. And also just an example of this CloudTrail service and what sort of security misconfigurations are there. So talking in more detail about CloudTrail. So what CloudTrail is actually this service that allows you to dig really deep into all of different actions that are happening in your AWS account. So you don't have to do anything special to enable CloudTrail. It is already enabled if you have AWS account. Just go to the CloudTrail service and you will see all different events there. So if you just do it like that, if you go to your AWS console on the web, you go into CloudTrail service, you will see logs there, but only for the past, I think as it says, 90 days. So it does make sense to connect it to either your S3 bucket or in some other way store it somewhere if you would like to use this data for some forensic investigation. Say if something happened and you would like to see what was there in past month, past 2 months, and get some sort of interesting insights about different actions from longer span than 90 days. So there is this possibility to create trail, which will basically store all of the CloudTrail logs in S3 bucket. And this is for free in the sense that, okay, if you enable it, it doesn't cost you additionally to use CloudTrail service, but you still need to pay for this S3 bucket. If you would like to enable second, third S3 bucket, that will also cost you some additional dollars just for the fact that you are storing it not on a single but 2 or 3 buckets. It doesn't make much sense. You can do the copy on your own rather than pay for this service. And also, it probably doesn't make much sense to store it in more than one S3 bucket, although I can see some advantages when it comes to redundancy. And when it comes to this CloudTrail events, here they are sort of displayed in a nice human-readable fashion, but they're basically JSON formatted pieces of information, and there are some typical common things like this event time, or here I was actually just logging to console, so it will also display which IP address I was using to connect from, which user agent, and so on. So this is, well, first of all, it is human readable, so to speak, but obviously it is as well machine readable. And because it is machine readable, it makes sense to analyze it a little bit if you have such opportunity. And for instance, you can join it with some other providers of security informations, like some threat intelligence tools, like VirusTotal and so on, if you're interested, and say, I would like to get an alert whenever someone is connecting to my AWS account from some suspicious IP address. So there is a possibility to come up with such an alert. And how to do that? Basically, from CloudTrail, if you configure this CloudTrail logs to go to an S3 bucket, you can also configure, this is not per se CloudTrail specific thing, but in any S3 bucket you can do this thing. Get a notification whenever there is a new object in the S3 bucket. Pipe it through an SNS topic, so another AWS service that allows you to have this sort of notifications messaging going on. And through that, ingest it into Elasticsearch. This SNS thing here, maybe it's not that much necessary, but say if you would like to use this S3 bucket and the logs there for some other services as well, it makes sense to do this messaging or notification topic there just to sort of route better the messages. And once you have Elasticsearch with all this JSON data, you can do some fancy stuff around it, visualize it in Kibana, or as I've mentioned, maybe use some other tools like ElastAlert is one of the popular ones for alerting out of this data in Elasticsearch. And now the last sort of service that I would like to introduce to you in this talk is GuardDuty. So GuardDuty is actually a service that is utilizing VPC flow logs, so all of the network traffic in your virtual private cloud in AWS. It also utilizes the DNS logs from the EC2 instances. Not so much to do anything fancy, but it just, as in this example earlier, it does. It can recognize, for instance, if your EC2 instance is connecting to some suspicious domain, or and hence if there is some IP address that it's suspicious that it connects to. And also CloudTrail logs, so all of the type of events that we've seen before. And I won't really go too much into GuardDuty. The Amazon doesn't also says too much about what sort of fancy machine learning, artificial intelligence they are doing. Obviously, it's their sort of secret sauce. But they claim that they can find things like compromised resources. So think EC2 instances, S3 buckets that are compromised. Things like activity different than the baseline. So this can encapsulate all different type of issues, because basically what they try to do is they try to get a baseline of what your typical activity in the AWS account is, and then if there is something extraordinary, they'll alert. Cryptocurrency miners, this has been a very popular topic in the past few years, so also something that they can alert you on. Penetration testing activity, so it's good to know when you have a pen test. Obviously, you will know about it if you organize it, but if you would like to test if your team does know about a pen test to your AWS account, it may be good to not mention it to them and see if they can get this type of insights from GuardDuty. Trojan attacks, so this is, I guess, coming from the fact that it has DNS logs and it knows if there is a piece of software on your EC2 instance that connects to some suspicious domains, that tries to resolve some suspicious domains. And also suspicious activities by unauthorized users. So if you have an S3 bucket that's being opened to a public and there is something suspicious happening there, it can alert you as well on that. Obviously, considering that you opened this S3 bucket to a public by mistake. And similar to CloudTrail, we can also envision some alerting pipeline, maybe more fancy here with GuardDuty. So there is this common theme of piping all of the events from GuardDuty to CloudWatch, which is another AWS service that allows you to monitor not only security events, but also any sort of other metrics and type of events in your AWS account. And as we've seen in some of the talks, also here at this conference, this sort of more and more popular theme of serverless, or as they're called, Lambda functions in AWS. So having not only just alerting, but also immediately remediation implemented in the Lambda function. So say we've got an alert that says that our EC2 instance has some funny, suspicious traffic to that potentially says it's compromised, or that's infected with some Trojan. What we can do, we can get this alert in the CloudWatch and then have Lambda function that will take a snapshot of this EC2 instance, freeze it, get a new one from a clean image, and boot this one instead of this compromised, and leave this compromised one, the frozen snapshot, for forensic analysis. So we can sort of automate this tedious actions that your security team would do manually each time there is such case. And obviously it is also more robust in the sense that you can, as this is automated, you can respond to this type of alerts faster. Say if this is happening on Saturday night and your security team is not really responding, or there is one person on call, but they still need to have like half an hour to 45 minutes to respond to see what's going on there. Sometimes it will be too late to get all the different insights, as the attackers themselves may just clean up after themselves. If this is happening in this automated fashion, obviously you have a bigger chance to catch it sort of right when it's happening. And just in summary, so first I've introduced this CloudMapper tool. It's relatively simple, cheap. Well, it's free. Obviously, you still need to have some time to run it. Easy to set up. There is not much configuration you need to do. Just create a security audit type role in your AWS account and the user that's in this role. And one of the disadvantages is that it doesn't have real-time monitoring. So if you would like to get some real-time or close to real-time fashion, you obviously will need to run it like every 5 minutes, every hour, every day, whatever sort of near real-time monitoring are we talking here about. Well, I guess if it's an hour or a day, it's not real-time or close to real-time, really. Scout Suite, very concise report, much more concise than in terms of CloudMapper. It's also like single-page application, so you can just take it, show it to whomever you want, put it somewhere on your Confluence and so on. Gives you very detailed analysis of each of the service. So actually there is a recap of not only the things that went wrong, but also the things that you took care of, and it displays it with this sort of good green severity. And as well, there is no real-time monitoring, so not same issue as with CloudMapper. CloudTrail, this is more real-time thing, more robust and detailed, obviously provided by AWS, so they take care of it. Still requires some processing. So if you have this events, if you just collect them, you don't do much with it. There is no really advantage to it. Obviously, once something happens and you want to go back to it, it's still worth to have them somewhere. And obviously, processing may incur some additional costs. So this alerting pipeline that I was showing there, if you need to set up an S3 bucket, an SNS topic, then obviously Elasticsearch instance, it costs a bit of more money and time to manage it. And GuardDuty, this is most robust, service, enterprise ready, and so on. You can think of all these different buzzwords: artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of the goodies. And I'm sure that they will introduce some more new stuff at reInvent. And thanks to that, it's expensive. Obviously, still worth to run it if you have large infrastructure. And they give you 30 days of free trial. Obviously, during 30 days, you basically will have this baseline established, and you still need to run it for a few more weeks, months to get some cool results out of it. And still requires some incident response. So I've shown an example how you can automate it, but still with the alerts that you get, you need to have a team that will respond to these alerts. Otherwise, it doesn't make really much sense to know about them. And this is pretty much it. Thanks a lot for your attention. If you'd like to rate my presentation, there is this app I've heard that you can download and put some feedback. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. If there are no questions, thanks a lot.